Welcome, everyone, to the NewVision, OldWays podcast, a greatly ambitious journey of discovery where we can all learn to live better, mentally healthier, and more fulfilling lives. If you're just discovering us, feel free to go back and take the journey from the beginning. And if you're already a NewVision, OldWays fan, welcome back and enjoy season
7.
And now, here is your host, Tony Marinaccio.
You are listening to NewVision, OldWays, the podcast that explores timeless wisdom for the modern mind in a fun, relaxed, and most important, interactive way with you, the listener. I am your host, Tony Marinaccio, and let's get the episode started. Welcome, Visioneers, to another great episode of the NewVision, OldWays podcast. And I want to thank you for the great comments I received about the last episode. I was a bit shocked that I did not have any scientist pushback on anything. I am not sure if that means I was right on the money with my research or there are not too many scientists listening. So either way, I am hoping it's my amazing research. But if there are any scientists out there that want to try to poke holes in this season's episodes, I'll take the constructive criticism like a man. And the ways to get a hold of the show are in the show notes and at the end of the show itself. And writing an episode like episode 69 is not easy when you are talking about science and spirituality, but I do believe in what I am writing about. And hopefully that episode struck a chord with you and we can run down that road again in the future. We do have many roads yet traveled and we will get down as many as I can. So I will continue to eat my Wheaties, drink my Tang. Not sure if the astronauts still do that or not, but whatever. And take my Flintstone vitamins and do a few push-ups and I will be ready for anything. Which leads us to, what do I have in store for you today? Well, I don't think it takes a scientist to verify that there are many people out there who look at the future as something to fear, not to embrace. What happened? Why is the future looking so gloomy for so many? Well, that is exactly what I will be working through today. And together, let's find a brighter outlook. Find that excitement for what could be, embrace the unknown, and live life like it's a fun journey, not a ride down Devil's Mountain just to crash and burn. And how do we do that? Well, there is no better time than right now to find out. So let's get episode number 70 started. Why people no longer embrace the future.
I was recently working with a young man who was terrified of going to college. He was bright and he was very skilled academically, but the thought of leaving home and going to college terrified him. He used to think, what if I fail all my classes? What if I hate my roommates? What if I can't find my way around campus? What if I don't stick to my budget and run out of money? What if I get depressed? What if I'm too anxious? What if? And he spent so much time worrying all summer that he had practically convinced himself to not go to college in the fall. And besides that, he just felt like anxious and sick to his stomach all the time. And the other thing was he put a ton of energy into trying to not worry and trying to not feel anxious, which of course made things worse. Do you do that? Do you worry so much about the future? Do all the thoughts of what could go wrong constantly run through your head? A little worry is okay. Worry serves a function. Beneficial worry prompts action. It can help us plan for the future by helping us think through possible problems and their solutions. But compulsive worry makes us feel sick and freeze up.
That was Emma McAdam. Her clips have made a few appearances on this show, and for good reason. She is great at what she does, and I included a link in the show notes for her Therapy in a Nutshell website, so check that out if you can. And that clip set us up perfectly for our discussion today. And there was once an unspoken assumption woven into everyday life that tomorrow would somehow be better than today. Even when people struggled, even when times were uncertain, there remained a belief that life was moving somewhere meaningful. People worked long hours because they believed sacrifice would eventually produce stability. Families endured difficult seasons because they believed future generations would benefit from their efforts. Young people dreamed because they assumed the future contained possibility. That belief acted almost like psychological fuel for the civilization itself. It helped people endure hardship, recover from setbacks, and continue building lives, communities, businesses, and families despite uncertainty. Today, something feels profoundly different. Many people no longer feel emotionally connected to the future. Yeah, they wake up, go through their routines, consume information, scroll endlessly, and handle responsibilities. But underneath it all exists an emotional numbness about what lies ahead. It is not simply stress. It is not simply burnout. It is deeper than that. It is a growing inability to imagine meaningful futures at all. Some call it anticipatory anxiety. You can feel this everywhere if you pay attention. People speak less about dreams and more about survival. Conversations increasingly revolve around instability, exhaustion, outrage, and fear. Younger generations often speak about adulthood not as an adventure, but as a burden they are unsure they can sustain. Many people no longer believe the systems surrounding them are designed to create stability, fairness, or upward movement. And whether those perceptions are fully accurate or not, psychologically, they are having an enormous consequence. Human beings require some sense of future orientation in order to thrive. The mind is designed to move towards something. Hope is not simply a pleasant emotion. It is a neurological necessity. When people believe their actions can improve their future, motivation increases, resilience increases, creativity increases, emotional endurance increases. But when people stop believing their actions matter, something dangerous begins happening internally. Energy declines, cynicism rises, anxiety grows, people become emotionally passive. They drift, they numb themselves, they disengage from life itself. I think this is one of the deepest modern crises we face, and yet it is rarely discussed directly. We talk constantly about politics, economics, technology, mental health, and cultural division. But beneath all of those conversations lies a deeper emotional truth. Millions of people no longer trust the future. Part of this comes from economic instability. For decades, society promoted a basic formula. You work hard, make responsible choices, and eventually life will stabilize. That promise now feels increasingly uncertain for many people. Housing costs have exploded, debt follows people for years, inflation eats away at income, entire industries feel fragile because of automation, artificial intelligence, outsourcing, and corporate restructuring. Even people who appear financially stable often feel psychologically insecure because they no longer trust the stability can last. What makes this especially exhausting is that uncertainty now feels permanent. Previous generations often experienced hardship in phases. A recession, a war, an economic downturn. But many people today feel like instability itself has become the normal state of existence. Crisis follows crisis, whether real or manufactured. Financial fear blends into political fear. Political fear blends into cultural fear. Cultural fear blends into environmental fear. People are not merely worried about one problem anymore. They may feel overwhelmed by the sensation that everything is unraveling simultaneously. This creates a psychological atmosphere where catastrophe begins feeling inevitable. And that is why doom culture has become so emotionally powerful. Entire online ecosystems now revolve around collapse narratives. Economic collapse, societal collapse, relationship collapse, environmental collapse, civilizational collapse. Every day, people consume endless predictions about decline, corruption, failure, and destruction. Some of these concerns are fairly legitimate, but there is also something psychologically seductive about constantly anticipating collapse. Collapse narratives give emotionally exhausted people a framework for their anxiety. If everything is doomed, then perhaps your hopelessness makes sense. If society is broken, perhaps your lack of motivation is understandable. Doom can become strangely comforting because it removes the burden of believing improvement is possible. Here is where I believe we fail so miserably as a society. The problem is that constant exposure to despair slowly reshapes the nervous system. Human beings are deeply influenced by emotional environments. When fear, outrage, and pessimism dominate daily life, people begin internalizing those emotions as reality itself. Social media accelerates this dramatically. Algorithms reward outrage because outrage captures attention. Fear spreads faster than hope. And I'll say that again. Fear spreads faster than hope. Cynicism appears more intelligent than optimism. Sarcasm becomes a defense mechanism against disappointment. Eventually, people begin protecting themselves emotionally by expecting failure in advance. This is where modern nihilism enters the culture. Remember nihilism from episode 58, an episode so worth going back to. Nihilism today does not always appear dramatic or philosophical. Most people are not openly declaring that life has no meaning. Instead, nihilism often appears as emotional disengagement. People stop caring deeply because caring feels dangerous. Hope feels risky. Commitment feels risky. Trust feels risky. People become emotionally detached in order to protect themselves from disappointment. You can see this in relationships. Many people fear vulnerability because modern culture increasingly trains people to expect betrayal, instability, and boredom. Dating apps create endless choice, but often weaken emotional depth. Friendships become fragmented. Families feel divided politically and culturally. Loneliness rises while hyperconnection expands. People are surrounded by communication, yet starving for genuine human grounding. Technology amplifies all of this. Human beings were never designed to absorb this much information. Comparison, outrage, stimulation, and emotional volatility every day. The nervous system now exists inside a constant stream of alerts, disasters, arguments, predictions, and curated perfection. We compare our ordinary lives against everyone else's highlight reels while simultaneously absorbing the darkest headlines on earth in real time. This creates a psychological contradiction where people feel both overstimulated and emotionally empty. And underneath all of this lies an even deeper issue. Many people no longer know what the larger story is they belong to. Throughout history, societies offered structures that helped human beings orient themselves psychologically. You had faith, family, shared values, community, duty, craftsmanship, service, sacrifice, meaning. Even imperfect systems gave people identity and direction. Today, many of those structures are weakening at the same time. What replaced them often feels spiritually hollow. Consumerism cannot replace meaning. Endless entertainment cannot replace purpose. Social media validation cannot replace belonging. Personal branding cannot replace identity. The human soul requires more than stimulation. It requires meaning. This is why so many people feel emotionally frozen. It is not simply laziness or weakness. Many people are overwhelmed, psychologically fragmented, spiritually exhausted, and disconnected from purpose. When human beings lose connection to meaningful futures, they stop investing emotionally in life itself. They stop building, they stop imagining, they stop believing that they can shape anything beyond immediate survival. And yet, despite all of this, I do not believe hopelessness is humanity's natural state. I think what people are truly searching for is agency. And personal agency is an individual's capacity to make choices and take actions that influence their lives, environment, and outcomes, reflecting a sense of control, autonomy, and self-determination. The feeling that their choices still matter, the feeling that they can still shape their lives, the feeling that meaning can still be created even in unstable times. This is where reclaiming the future begins. Not through blind optimism, not through pretending everything is fine, because false positivity only deepens disconnection because people know when something feels artificial. Real hope is not denial. Real hope is the decision to continue building meaning despite uncertainty, and that changes everything. Because once people reclaim agency, even small actions begin restoring psychological strength. Taking care of your body matters. Learning a new skill matters. Building friendships matter. Creating art matters. Developing discipline matters. Strengthening family matters. Protecting your integrity matters. Spiritual growth matters. Helping another human being matters. These things seem small compared to global problems, but they are precisely how human beings rebuild emotional resilience. Modern culture often convinces people that only massive systems matter. Massive governments, massive corporations, massive crises, massive disasters. But human beings do not regain hope through abstract systems alone. They regain hope through direct participation in meaningful life, through contribution, through responsibility, through purpose. The future begins becoming visible again when people stop viewing themselves merely as passive observers of collapse and start seeing themselves as active participants in creation. That does not mean ignoring reality. Difficult times are real. Economic pressures are real. Cultural fragmentation is real. Technological disruption is real. But throughout history, humanity has survived dark periods before. Civilizations recover because enough people continue choosing to build rather than surrender spiritually. That may be the greatest battle of our time, not merely political or economic, but psychological and spiritual. The battle to maintain vision in an age dominated by fear. Because hopelessness spreads when people believe they are powerless. But strength returns when people rediscover that their actions still matter. You may not control the entire culture, but you can control whether you become consumed by it. You could choose what enters your mind daily. You can choose whether fear becomes your identity. You could choose whether you build or merely react. You could choose whether you strengthen your body or neglect it. You could choose whether you deepen relationships or isolate yourself. And you could choose whether you become bitter or resilient, and you could choose whether you contribute meaning or you consume despair. And perhaps that is the deeper truth modern culture desperately needs to rediscover. The future is not something we passively wait for. It is something human beings actively create through belief, action, sacrifice, imagination, and courage.
And now, Visioneers, let's take a quick break to let you know how you can support the show. By clicking on the Patreon donate link in the show notes, or by typing in patreon.com/NewVisionOldWays, or at the NewVisionOldWays.com website, you can show your support by donating directly to the New Vision Old Ways podcast. These episodes take time and money to produce, and by donating what you are able to, it will allow us to grow the show and give you the best content that we can. Of course, you can cancel at any time. Remember, click on the Patreon donate link in the show notes, or by typing in patreon.com/NewVisionOldWays, or at the NewVisionOldWays.com website. Hint, you are able to donate a one-time lump sum. Then, cancel right after. Options are always a good thing. Thank you, and now, back to the show.
Every civilization experiences uncertainty. Every generation faces moments where the future feels unstable. But history ultimately belongs to those who continue building despite fear. The people who continue imagining possibility while others surrender to cynicism, and the people who refuse spiritual resignation. Maybe reclaiming the future begins with something very simple: opening your eyes again. Thinking beyond survival, allowing yourself to believe that your life still carries purpose, allowing yourself to imagine meaning again, not perfection, not certainty, meaning. Because perhaps the greatest rebellion in an age of despair is refusing to stop believing that life can still become something beautiful. And maybe civilizations recover this the exact same way human beings do, one person at a time, internally. Another reason people no longer embrace the future is because so many no longer feel psychologically grounded in reality itself. We are living through a period where human attention, emotion, and cognition are constantly being competed for, manipulated, and monetized. Not necessarily through some grand conspiracy, but through systems that increasingly profit from emotional activation. We are living inside what could reasonably be described as a form of psychological warfare. Of course, not military warfare in the traditional sense, but informational, emotional, and cognitive warfare. Every single day, people are bombarded with outrage, fear, tribal conflict, political hostility, emotional triggering, and algorithmically amplified anxiety. Say that 10 times fast. The modern human nervous system is under constant assault from stimulation designed to capture attention, intensify emotion, and keep people psychologically engaged for as long as possible. Social media platforms, news organizations, political movements, corporations, influencers, and algorithms are all competing for one thing above all else: your attention. And the unfortunate truth is that fear captures attention better than peace. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Emotional conflict generates more engagement than calm reflection. Human beings are biologically wired to react to danger, so modern systems increasingly exploit those ancient survival mechanisms for profit, influence, and control. This creates what I would call propaganda fatigue. Not necessarily propaganda in the old-fashioned sense where governments simply dictate one narrative, but a constant saturation of competing narratives, all demanding emotional loyalty at the same time. Every issue becomes emotionally charged. Every event becomes tribalized. Every headline feels engineered to provoke fear, anger, or panic. Over time, people become psychologically exhausted because their nervous systems never fully exit a state of emotional vigilance. And when people remain emotionally activated long enough, critical thinking begins deteriorating. Fear narrows cognition. Outrage simplifies complexity. Anxiety reduces reflection. And emotion overrides discernment. This is why modern discourse increasingly feels reactive instead of thoughtful. People are not merely debating ideas anymore. They are emotionally identifying with narratives. Politics becomes identity. Media becomes tribal. Information becomes warfare. Entire populations become psychologically conditioned to interpret reality through emotional allegiance instead of independent thinking. This is where maintaining sovereignty of mind becomes essential. Because one of the greatest modern dangers is not simply misinformation, it is gradual surrender of individual cognition itself. The inability to think clearly outside emotional manipulation. The inability to pause before reacting. The inability to separate truth from emotional conditioning. Algorithms now learn human behavior with astonishing precision. They study what triggers outrage, what increases fear, what prolongs engagement, what deepens tribal identity, and what keeps people emotionally activated. The result is that many people are no longer calmly consuming information. They are existing inside personal psychological feedback loops, and those loops slowly shape perception of reality.
Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Deep, dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, and agony on me.
Well, I'm not sure that was overly appropriate, but hee-haw rides again. So anyway, if someone consumes endless economic collapse content, the future begins feeling hopeless. If someone consumes endless political outrage, society begins feeling irredeemable. If someone consumes endless fear-driven media, danger begins appearing everywhere. Human beings eventually become what they repeatedly consume psychologically. This is why so many people feel emotionally overwhelmed, yet strangely unable to disconnect. The nervous system becomes addicted to stimulation while simultaneously exhausted by it. Doom scrolling becomes a form of emotional compulsion. People seek information hoping to regain certainty, yet endless information often deepens confusion instead. And perhaps most dangerously, constant emotional activation leaves very little room for reflection or imagination or wisdom or genuine inner life. Human beings require stillness in order to think deeply. They require silence in order to hear themselves clearly. But modern systems often keep people so emotionally stimulated that they rarely spend enough uninterrupted time alone with their own thoughts to develop independent judgment. That is not healthy for individuals or civilizations. A society that loses the ability to think calmly becomes highly vulnerable to manipulation. Fearful populations are easier to influence. Emotionally divided populations are easier to control. Chronically distracted populations are easier to redirect. So unfortunately, the great New York City is about to find out all of this pretty quickly. And again, this does not require some hidden conspiracy behind the scenes. Systems naturally evolve toward what captures attention and generates profit. Unfortunately, what captures human attention most effectively is often conflict, fear, outrage, socialism, and tribalism. The result is a culture where many people feel psychologically fragmented. Their minds are overloaded, their emotions exhausted, and their ability to envision meaningful futures weakened by constant exposure to negativity, fear, and the lack of upward movement. This is why protecting your mind has become one of the most important forms of modern self-defense. Not by withdrawing from reality, not by becoming paranoid, but by becoming conscious of what you consume. Conscious of what shapes your emotions, conscious of who benefits from your outrage, conscious of how repetition influences belief, conscious of when fear is distorting your perception. You better say this and you better think that, or else. Maintaining sovereignty of mind means refusing to allow external systems to completely dictate your emotional state, your worldview, your identity, or psychological stability. It means learning how to step back from constant stimulation and think independently again. That may require uncomfortable things in modern culture: silence, reflection, reading deeply instead of reacting instantly, spending time in nature, having a real conversation instead of digital arguments, limiting emotional overexposure to media cycles, and rebuilding the capacity for sustained attention. Because the ability to think clearly is becoming increasingly rare, and rare things become powerful. People who remain calm while others are emotionally manipulated become difficult to control. People who can think independently become difficult to tribalize. People who can maintain perspective amid fear cycles become psychologically resilient. Reclaiming the future requires reclaiming ownership of our own minds, because if human beings lose the ability to think freely, reflect deeply, and imagine independently, then hopelessness becomes almost inevitable. But if people can recover mental clarity, emotional discipline, and independent thought, then possibility returns. And perhaps that is one of the greatest acts of rebellion available in the modern world: to remain psychologically sovereign in a culture constantly competing for control of our attention, emotions, and perception of reality. So the future can be bright. You have to become excited again, but you need the courage to move forward and focus, and never let the world at large steal your soul or your love of life or your future.
Every single day, you have two choices. You can spend your time building the future you want, or keep repeating the habits that keep you where you are. One choice leads to growth, wealth, and opportunity. The other leads to excuses, delays, and regret. Success is not created in a single moment. It's created by the decisions you make every day. Choose wisely, because your future is watching.
So, the truth is, a lot of people are waiting for permission to live again, permission to feel hopeful again, to trust again, to build something again, to believe the future might still hold something worthwhile. But no government is coming to hand that back to you. No algorithm is going to restore your spirit. No media cycle is suddenly going to become healthy for your mind, that's for sure. And no culture addicted to outrage is going to wake up tomorrow and decide peace, wisdom, and meaning are more profitable than fear. That is our responsibility now, because the modern world is perfectly designed to keep people psychologically weak. Distracted people buy more, fearful people obey more, angry people click more, confused people depend more. And while people argue endlessly online and emotionally exhaust themselves every single day, their actual lives slowly drift away from them. Years pass, dreams shrink, curiosity disappears, and eventually, people wake up one day realizing they never truly lived. They merely reacted. Reacted to headlines, outrage, pressure, fear, and they reacted to everyone else's definition of reality. That is not living. That is psychological captivity. And at some point, people need to make a decision. Do you want your mind owned by the culture around you? Or do you want your mind and life back? Well, now is the time to make that critical decision. Let's take back our minds, our souls, our lives, and look to the future with wonder and amazement, because we only get one chance here on earth. Let's not waste it on mindless crap, for lack of a better term. Let's grab life by the horns and ride into the future knowing we got this.
So, what did you think of this episode or any of the episodes? We would love to find out. And here is where to get a hold of the show and let us know. These are in the show notes, but as always, here they are. There is a Patreon support link in the show notes and on the NewVision OldWays.com website that you can click on that will allow you to donate to the show and show your support. By donating what you can, it will allow us to book guests and cover costs. Anything will help. Cancel anytime. You can also message the show from each episode on your various platforms. Just look for the Send Us a Text Message link. If that doesn't work for you, you can email us at newvisionoldways@gmail.com. You can find us on what was Twitter, now X, at NewVisionOldWay, no S on that one. Check the New Vision Old Ways YouTube channel. Type in New Vision, one word, Old Ways, one word, channel, and please subscribe. It is free and will show support for the show. It really means a lot and will help grow the show on YouTube. Find us on Facebook, New Vision Old Ways, podcast you should easily find us. And as a reminder, these are still growing platforms for us and expanding all the time, so we need your help to get the flow going with the community. And last but not least, if you can do me a huge favor and subscribe to us, like us, follow us, leave a review on whatever platform you found us on. That would be so appreciated. That will also help secure guests that we will be booking in the future. So, here we are, Season 7. We have a lot to cover, so thank you for listening. We can't wait to get your input, and I also can't wait until we get together for the next episode of New Vision Old Ways. Until then, stay true to yourself, stay informed, and stay empowered.
But the most important thing is...
This episode and all the episodes of New Vision Old Ways podcast have been written, engineered, and produced by Tony Marinaccio and TKM Productions.